There is a version of you that clings to excuses, to doubts, to fear of discomfort and uncertainty. This version avoids responsibility, waits for the perfect moment, hides behind blame, and hopes things will change on their own. But life does not transform through hope alone, and growth does not come from waiting. It comes from intentional effort, from confronting the truth that the weaker version of yourself must be confronted and conquered. Marcus Aurelius understood this internal war, not against others, but against the unruly self, the emotional, the undisciplined, the reactive self that seeks pleasure and flees pain. The Stoic path is the harder path. It demands that you rise above the noise of the world, and more importantly, the noise within yourself. It is about controlling what you can control, your mind, your actions, your choices, while accepting without complaint what lies beyond your power. This is the battlefield where your transformation begins. Not tomorrow, not when it's easy, not when it feels right, but right now. In the present moment, the weak version of you rationalizes bad habits and procrastination. It says, I deserve a break, even when the work is not yet done. It says, I'll start tomorrow, when you know tomorrow is a fantasy built by fear. This version of you wants the comfort of results without the discomfort of process. And that version must be buried daily in discipline and indecision. Marcus wrote, at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. That's the call to arms. The reminder that your life is not a pursuit of ease but of excellence. That every day is a chance to either rise or regress, to build or destroy, to lead or be led. And this choice isn't made once. It is made in the smallest of moments. The weak version will always offer you a way out, but the stronger version, the Stoic self, knows that your character is shaped not when you do what you want, but when you do what is required. Strength is not loud. It's quiet. It's shown in waking early when the bed is warm. It's in holding your tongue when insulted. It's in doing the work, unseen, uncelebrated, and without demand for applause. This strength is earned. It is forged. Marcus Aurelius sat each morning to write in his private journal, to remind himself not to be seduced by comfort, not to be pulled by emotion, not to be puffed up by praise or deflated by criticism. This was not weakness. This was warfare, internal warfare. And if you are serious about rising, you must also become a warrior of the mind. You must slay the part of you that seeks the path of least resistance, that wants the results without the routine, that pretends to be a victim when it's really afraid of responsibility. That part of you thrives when you ignore your conscience, when you surrender your agency, when you indulge your appetites without limit. That part of you cannot go where you want to go. It cannot carry you to greatness. It must die. The Stoics did not believe in the elimination of emotion. They believed in mastering it. They believed in not being ruled by it. The weak version of you reacts to anger, jealousy, failure. It lashes out, it retreats, it sulks, but the disciplined mind absorbs the emotion, interprets it with wisdom, and responds with virtue. You will be tempted to go back to the old version of yourself, to give in, to make exceptions, but what you allow is what will multiply. And if you allow weakness to speak, to guide, to define your days, it will dominate you. The stronger you understands that excellence is not about inspiration. It is about intention. The Stoic self shows up even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. The real work is in the shadows, away from applause, where self-respect is either earned or eroded. The weak version of you is a collection of habits and patterns that once served you, but now imprison you. These are the habits of delay, of distraction, of seeking comfort when discomfort is exactly what's needed. The weak self is born from years of avoiding the hard truth, but truth doesn't go away, it waits. And the truth is this: who you are today is not fixed. It is formed by every decision you make. The Stoics believed you could begin again at any moment, that you are not your past. You are your present choices. You are your ability to change direction now, not later, not when things feel better, but now. You kill the weak version of yourself every time you take full responsibility, every time you reject self-pity and embrace action, every time you sit in silence and observe your mind instead of letting your mind control you, every time you turn discomfort into training. You kill it every time you show restraint when tempted, endurance when tired, and resolve when life feels unfair. Because fairness isn't the measure of life. Integrity is. Your character is not measured by how you feel, but by what you do regardless of how you feel. The weak version of you builds a castle of excuses. The Stoic version of you tears that down with brick by brick accountability. No one will force you to change. No one will do the work for you. Marcus wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." That is the Stoic urgency. Not fear of death, but awareness of how precious each moment is. The weak version lives like time is endless. It wastes days, months, years. The real you knows every breath matters, that every moment spent procrastinating is a moment stolen from your potential, and that every moment spent in discipline is a step towards self-respect. In fact, you don't need to punish yourself. You need to parent yourself. You need to be the guide, the coach, the ruler of your thoughts and your time. The weak self wants indulgence. The strong self wants improvement. That battle will never end, but your victories will get easier. Discipline becomes a habit. Clarity becomes natural. Action becomes reflex. But first, you must decide who's in charge. You must kill that version of you that still waits for someone to save you. You are that someone. The weak version of you was built by accident. The real you will be built by design. By repetition, by reason, by effort. The Stoics didn't care about external success. They cared about the soul, about virtue, about living aligned with wisdom. They didn't fear pain. They feared becoming slaves to pleasure. They didn't fear death. They feared never truly living. You must walk this path with the same courage. You must let go of the identity that keeps you small. You must stop bargaining with your potential. There is no negotiating with weakness. There is only replacing it with action, with discipline, with focus. That is the way forward. That is how the transformation begins. That is how the weak version of you starts to die and the true version begins to rise. Not by chance, not by comfort, but by conscious effort, daily sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of virtue. Because the war within is not won in a single moment, but in every moment you refuse to surrender to who you were and commit again to who you are becoming. You are not here to be ruled by your impulses or emotions. You are not here to serve fear or to bend under pressure. You are not here to live according to the expectations of a world that has no idea what your potential truly is. You are here to conquer, to dominate not others but yourself, to master your own mind, to break through the limits of your comfort and emerge forged by the flames of your own discipline. And to do that, you will have to kill the version of you that clings to weakness, the version of you that hesitates, that complains, that seeks approval, that avoids pain and uncertainty. That version must die so that your true self can live. That version of you that constantly looks for the easy way out, that negotiates with excuses, that justifies procrastination, that convinces itself that tomorrow is a better time to start. That version will never carry you to your purpose. It is the voice of your lower nature. It is not your friend. It is your enemy disguised as comfort, disguised as safety, disguised as good intentions, and you must see through the illusion and call it what it is: weakness. And then you must have the courage to silence it through action, to challenge it with discipline, to starve it with intention. Marcus Aurelius didn't become great because he was born with power. He became great because he ruled himself before ruling Rome, because he sat with his journal not to inspire others but to hold himself accountable, because he chose reason over rage, virtue over vanity, because he understood that the man who is mastered by his mind is a slave, but the man who masters his mind is free. You will never be free until you decide that excuses no longer belong in your vocabulary, until you see hesitation as betrayal, until you understand that every time you feed the weaker version of yourself, you are digging a grave for your potential. The world does not owe you ease. No one is coming to rescue you from the consequences of your inaction. You must become the one who acts even when it hurts, the one who stands when others fall, the one who walks forward when everything inside screams to retreat, the one who builds the habits that kill the old identity, that cut off chains of mediocrity and emotional slavery. You must become the executioner of your old patterns, and you must do it relentlessly, not once, not twice, but every single day. The weak version of you thrives in distraction, in scrolling, in gossip, in judgment, in anything that pulls you away from doing the work. It thrives when you lie to yourself, when you delay, when you avoid discomfort by seeking pleasure. But those moments are where the battle is fought and where the victory is decided. The Stoics knew this. They trained for hardship, they welcomed challenge, they lived prepared for loss, for rejection, for pain, and in doing so, they became unshakable, because nothing outside could disturb the one who had mastered what was inside you. Kill the weak self by facing the truth, by admitting your flaws without shame, by choosing to rise in the moments when falling would be easier, by not needing someone else to tell you what to do because your standards are already higher than their expectations. You kill it when you embrace voluntary hardship, when you choose discipline before it's forced on you by regret, when you say no to the things that feel good now but steal your strength tomorrow, when you understand that temporary discomfort is the seed of long-term power. You must stop worshiping your feelings. They are not gods to be obeyed. They are signals to be understood. You must feel the fear and still move, feel the doubt and still act, feel the exhaustion and still persist, because power is not in feeling strong but in choosing strength even when you feel weak. That is where identity is formed, in doing the thing your weaker self resists, in showing up when no one is watching, in saying to yourself, I am not who I was. I am who I decide to be. There is no honor in waiting for motivation. The Stoics never waited to feel ready. They simply did what was necessary, and that is what you must do, not for applause, not for likes, not for validation, but because you have made a contract with your highest self, and that contract demands execution. It demands focus. It demands sacrifice. The weak self will scream as you drag it into the light. It will resist as you cut off its food supply. It will beg you to go back, but you cannot listen. You cannot be swayed, because the moment you let it speak, it will take back the throne. You kill that weak version by setting non-negotiable standards, by keeping your promises to yourself, by becoming the kind of person who does what he says he will do even when it's boring, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. You build confidence not through affirmations but through actions, by doing the hard things until they become your default. You remove weakness not by shaming it, but by outgrowing it, by replacing it with habits that serve your future, not your feelings. The weak version wants comfort at the cost of character. The Stoic self chooses character even when it costs comfort, because greatness doesn't grow in ease. It grows in tension, in fire, in friction, in choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That is the code of the one who is rising. That is the discipline that separates the temporary from the eternal, the ordinary from the exceptional. You must understand that you are always creating yourself, whether by action or inaction, whether by discipline or distraction. Every moment you are either killing the weaker self or feeding it, and the more often you choose the difficult path, the more natural it becomes, the more the old self shrinks, the more the new self thrives, and eventually it is no longer a battle. It is simply who you are, but until then, you must fight, and the weapon is your will, sharpened by clarity, guided by reason, strengthened by repetition. Do not wait for circumstances to change. You are not the victim of your environment. You are the product of your standards, of your decisions, and of your discipline. The weak version of you will not walk away on its own. It must be hunted, exposed, and destroyed through deliberate action. That version of you cannot follow you where you are going. It cannot lift the weight you must carry. It cannot hold the vision you must protect. It cannot survive the demands of your destiny, and so it must die, not with shame, but with finality, not with mourning, but with resolve, because the only way to become who you were meant to be is to let go of who you used to be, and the only way to let go is to act with intention, with consistency, with unshakable commitment to the future you are building with every choice you make now. There is a version of yourself that exists only because you have allowed it to survive. A version born not from your potential, but from your patterns, not from your power, but from your fear. This version hesitates when it should act, complains when it should reflect, and flees when it should stand firm. It is the version that chooses comfort over challenge, ease over excellence, distraction over direction. It is not you. It is the shadow of who you could be, and the time has come for that version to die. You were not made to live according to the standards of your weakest moments. You were not designed to surrender to every passing emotion or fleeting doubt. You were built for more than surviving, more than coping, more than existing in a cycle of reaction and regret. The Stoics knew this truth intimately. Marcus Aurelius wrote not to inspire the world, but to remind himself daily of who he was meant to be and who he refused to remain. He understood that the war is never out there. The war is within each morning you wake. The battlefield presents itself again. The weak version of you whispers temptations dressed as compassion. It says you've done enough, you deserve to rest, you shouldn't push so hard. But this is not kindness. It is sabotage in disguise. That voice wants to keep you small, not safe. It wants to protect its existence, not your future. And every time you choose to listen, you give it breath. You feed it life, and it grows stronger, while the real you remains buried beneath the weight of your own hesitation to kill that weak version. You must do what is unnatural. You must act before you feel ready. You must move when your mind offers resistance. You must walk into discomfort as if it were your home, because that is where your higher self lives, not in the place of ease, but in the place of effort, not in the applause of others, but in the silence of unseen discipline. Every decision you make is a declaration of who you are becoming. And if you do not choose consciously, you will default to the patterns of self you are trying to destroy. The Stoic philosophy demands mastery of the mind, not the absence of emotion, but the command of it, not the suppression of fear, but the confrontation of it. It is not a philosophy of withdrawal, but of radical responsibility. Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that sentence holds the key to freedom, because as long as you believe your circumstances determine your potential, the weak version of you will always have an excuse to survive. But once you take back control, once you stop blaming and start building, stop reacting and start responding, stop avoiding and start advancing, the old self begins to die, not because it fades on its own, but because you starve it. You deny it its food, excuses, comforts, lies. And it cannot endure the light of your awareness, the weight of your consistency, or the fire of your discipline. It begins to fade when you tell yourself the truth, and then act in alignment with that truth. The weak self is not a villain to hate, but a version to bury. It is simply the result of untrained thoughts and undirected habits, and that means it can be dismantled, piece by piece, choice by choice. You do not need to become someone new. You need to unearth who you were before fear taught you to shrink, before society trained you to conform, before failure convinced you to settle. Underneath the noise is the real you, The disciplined, clear, capable self that is waiting to lead. Killing the weak version requires repetition, not once, not occasionally, but daily. Every act of discipline is a dagger, every moment of courage a strike. Every morning you rise without negotiation is another inch taken back. And eventually, momentum builds, your old patterns break, and the new identity solidifies not in theory, but in practice. You become what you repeatedly do, and the actions of the strong self must become so consistent that the weak self no longer recognizes the terrain it once ruled. You must decide who you are in the dark, not when it's easy, not when it's obvious, but when it's quiet and no one is watching. That is where integrity is formed. That is where your future is built. The weak version of you wants validation. It wants results without work, rewards without discipline, meaning without suffering. But it is the suffering that forges the man. It is the pressure that forms the shape, and it is the process that refines the identity. Marcus Aurelius knew his time was temporary. He knew death was inevitable, and that is what made his choices urgent. Every moment wasted was a betrayal of purpose. Every concession to weakness was a step away from virtue. He wrote as a reminder that the clock is always ticking, that the opportunity to rise is fleeting, and that you must choose your character before life chooses your consequence. The weak version of you believes you have time, but the stronger version knows time is already leaving. There will be days when the old voice returns, when it offers the comfort of mediocrity, when it tells you that greatness is for others, that excellence is too hard, that you've tried enough, done enough, suffered enough. And in those moments you must remember that the pain of remaining is greater than the pain of becoming, that to regress is to reject your own potential, and that to accept your limits is to declare them eternal, but they are not. They are only there until you go beyond them. Your job is not to be perfect, but to be relentless, not to have all the answers, but to refuse to stop searching, not to feel strong every day, but to act with strength every day. The weak version of you can only exist when you accept it as your identity. The moment you begin to identify with discipline, with focus, with self-control, that version begins to die, and something new emerges, not someone different, but someone fully aligned with who you were always meant to be. You will not get there by accident. You will not stumble into greatness. You will not be handed transformation without first earning it through countless unseen victories. The Stoics believed that virtue is the highest good, and that every situation, no matter how painful, is an opportunity to demonstrate that virtue, and that means every struggle is a test. Every delay is a training ground, and every challenge is a chance to kill the old self again. You will not be remembered for what you planned to do, but for what you actually did, not for what you hoped to become, but for what you chose to become. And those choices begin now, in this moment, in this breath, in the thoughts you allow, the habits you repeat, the standards you accept, and the vision you protect with discipline. And if you do not rise now, when will you? And if you do not kill that version of yourself today, how long will you keep dragging it into tomorrow?